So bonds interested in trailing stops that would move from one moving average to another. All right, so yeah, things seem to be working out okay here. We'll start at the slower period, right, and then have that trailing stop loss move to the medium speed, right, moving average, and then eventually to the faster moving average, like so. Yeah, let's see here. So Vaughn is saying entry could be the initial cross. Yeah, so this is not a Bloodhound workshop, so I can't build any entry signals. All right, so the question is, yeah, how do we move stop losses from one moving average to the next and to the next? So, all right, so let's just create an entry order. I'm going to skip the profit target and let's just jump right down to the stop losses here. So let's see here. So I'm going to start with a custom stop loss because, yeah, I mean, none of these really give us any kind of help or leg up here. Yeah, there's no benefit in trying to even start with the parabolic SAR there. So let's start with the custom, and we'll just build this from scratch. All right, so in the initial placement, right, that's going to be your moving average that's furthest away. So we're going to take the mode here and switch it from price to indicator value. All right, there we go. So now we have access to the indicators. So let's change the SMA to the T3. All right, there's our T3. And we'll put in the slower moving average there. All right. Okay, so that's setting up the initial placement there. So now we need to go to the trailing action. So this is really what the question's all about here. And let me stretch this out a little bit there. Okay, so we're going to set the mode to custom. And so now we can start building a custom trailing rules here. So let's add our first one here. And we'll give this a name here. This one will be the 100 period, right? And so the next thing you have to decide is when do you want your stop loss to move from one moving average to the next, right? From one indicator to the next here, right? And, you know, I guess a lot of people will use profit, you know, so once a certain profit's been achieved. But you do have other alternatives here. Let's see here. So you could use the interval and just wait a certain number of bars, right, or a certain time period, right? I guess, yeah, let's go ahead and load up the interval there, right? So you have all of these different options here with the interval. They're basically time-based there. Although the last one is actually does look at the market movement there. So, all right, so we have that. Let's see, next one, price versus indicator, right? So this trigger basically compares one data point to another data point, right? You have input A and input B. Very similar to the comparison solver in Bloodhound, right? So you can compare, one price, and this doesn't have to be price, right? This can be an indicator. So you can compare an indicator to an indicator, right? So again, it's like the comparison solver in Bloodhound there, right? And you have, but it's a simplified version, right? Because you have just these simple comparisons, right? Is input A, you know, above input B, or is it below, right? So on and so forth. So, you know, that's another, you know, option there that you can use to help to decide when you want to move your stop loss from one indicator to the next there. You have an indicator value. So indicator value is primarily used for something like the MACD, the stochastics, momentum, right? Where think of it, the indicator value is basically like the threshold solver. It's a simplified version of the threshold solver. So you could make sure the MACD or you could trigger moving your stop loss when the MACD goes from negative a negative value on the MACD to a positive value, right? Or move it actually. Sorry, the way I phrase that, that's actually more of a crossover solver there. So being like the threshold solver, the indicator value would just using the MACD as an example there, right? Making sure that the MACD is greater than 0. And if the MACD is greater than 0, right, then it'll move your stop loss there. And let's see here. Yeah, and as mentioned, the first one, typically, right, profit or loss there. So since that seems to be kind of the most common triggering mechanism that I get there, I'll go with that. And let's look for a certain amount of profits there. Actually, I'll go with points. Yeah, let's go with points. And let's see here. Yeah, I think just kind of looking at the Y scaling here, probably 3 points. I think the markets will work with 3 points here today. Right? And then the action is, what moving average do you want to move your stop loss to? So, right. So we're going to move our stop loss to, and we can see right now it's set to price, right? The last price. So we're going to open this up, and once again, we're going to change the mode to indicator value. And now we can plug in our T3. All right, select that T3 and put in that period. There we go, 100. And then lastly, right, we need to set the repeat to indefinitely there. All right, and since this is an indicator that the moving average is following, it's going to repeat, right? The indicator only updates once per bar. So we're going to leave this repeat to once per bar. So, right, there's no advantage of trying to use ticks of movement, right? Because indicators don't update on a tick-by-tick basis. So this would only, if you did switch over to ticks of movement, that's just going to perform a ton of unnecessary calculations, right? So you're just going to stress your computer out. Recalculating the indicator on a tick-by-tick basis, even though it's not updating, right? Because it only updates when the bar closes. So, all right. So when you're using an indicator, you should always leave the repeat to once per bar. Right. Okay. So there's our second moving average. So let's get our faster moving average in here. And what is this? 75. There we go. All right. So once again, I'll just go with the profit or loss. Put this on profit, and I'll put it on points again. This time, all right, I'll just do 5 points. Yeah, so we can try and get this stop loss to move a little quicker. And again, let's go to the action and set our action to an indicator value. And this time, to help save a little time there, right? BlackBird remembered, you used the T3 last time, so you might want to use it again, so it's already up there for us. So we'll save a little time there, but now we need to put in the faster period, like so. And all right, almost done. And then once again, last step here is to set our repeat to indefinitely. And again, it's already set to once per bar, right? Update or repeat once per bar. And that's it. So, all right, now let's go ahead and test this out. If all right, good. Maybe the market will move up and I can take a long trade here. Actually, since, yeah, I am on a 10-minute delayed data feed here. So yeah, I can tell the market's going down. So let's go short. And there we go. All right, we're starting off on the slower moving average. Actually, I don't know what direction the ES is going. I have the NQ pulled up. Well, yeah, hopefully the ES will follow the NQ down a little bit for us there. Now, you notice how the T3 was still rising, but of course our stop loss didn't move backwards, right? Because that's not how stop losses should typically move. So yeah, so BlackBird does not move your stop loss away by default there. Yeah. All right, I think the market's going to start moving down here in the next minute. Or maybe not. Well, what the heck? Let's go long. See what happens here. All right, now I think the market's going down here. So, there. Well, it's going to be very hard with the moving averages consolidated on each other. Let's see here. All right, yeah, so Vaughn has, follow up here. Yeah, so Vaughn, I'm not sure what you mean here. So you want to delay the trigger until the trigger of the stop loss until price crosses the trailer. So if you're trying to delay the entry of your stop loss, no. What BlackBird places your exit orders as soon as your entry order is filled. Yeah, there's no way to delay the exit orders, if that's what you're asking. So let's see. He's saying, shouldn't that have moved to B and C by now? Yeah, as you can see, it is. Right? There you go. So it is following the faster moving average. The issue was all the moving averages were consolidated, so how could you tell? Right? Yeah, I only set them to 3 points and 5 points, and so yeah, that happened pretty quickly there. So let's try this again here. Let's cancel that. Let's go short. There we go. So now that they're spread out, now we can see things moving a little quicker here. Oh, you know what? One thing I forgot is I forgot the trailing of the slower moving average. Look at that. So let's go and add that in there. But there you go. So now it's trailing the middle, right? The medium speed moving average. And if we get down to, what is that, about 91? So if it gets down to 86, yeah, it looks like it needs to get a couple more ticks down. Almost got there. So it just needs to get a few ticks lower, or maybe one more point lower, and then it'll start following the faster moving average there. But there we go. So I did leave out the initial T3 150 period there, right? So since the stop loss is starting off at the 150 period there, there's no trigger, right? We just want that stop loss to start following it is right immediately. So now we just move straight to the action there, set it up to indicator value, go in and modify our period like so, and set our repeat to indefinitely, and there we go.
Use event pending.
All right. There. All right, let's try this again. Let's go short. And there we go. So it moved to the medium speed there. And now it just moved to the faster one. So there we have it. So let's take a little recap here, right? So on the options tab, right, our initial placement, right, is going to be the slower period moving average there. And then, and let's see, let's sort here, sort this by name. Oh, all right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you know, excuse me, computer sorting algorithms aren't always what you want them to be. So, yeah, so they're out of order there. Oh, no wonder. There we go. We have an extra 2 in there. Maybe that'll work. There we go. Yeah. All right. It is what it is. So we have the three trailing rules, one for each moving average. All right. And then, of course, you need to, decide what determines, when BlackBird switches from one moving average to the next there, right? So that's what the triggers do. The triggers, right, give you a bunch of options here to determine, what is it about the market, what kind of conditions there determine when you go from one moving average to the next, right? And then the action, is what tells BlackBird where you want to move that stop loss to, and then the repeat indefinitely. Now, the next question, that you should ask yourself is, well, how does BlackBird know, right, which moving average to use here, right? Let's say all of these triggers are all triggered at the same time, right? Or clearly we can see here that the 150 period, it has no trigger. So it starts acting immediately, right? But once all the other triggers have occurred, then how does BlackBird know? Well, that's what the evaluate using is, right? So this is what determines which trailing rule BlackBird will use to move your stop loss to, right? That's determined by this evaluate process, right? And so with the stop loss, right, the standard way that you move a stop loss is you always move that stop loss closest to price, right? So whichever action here will move your stop loss closest to price, then that's the one that BlackBird goes with. So, right? So, yeah, so whichever one of these T3s is going to be closer to price is what BlackBird will use. Yeah, and that's how BlackBird decides which of all those trailing rules it's going to use to pull your trail your stop loss there. All right, well, looks like that does it for this question.